The following is a Spirit Street production.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. This is the Big 12 Insiders Game Day. Look, today we got a good show for you. We're discussing, is the Arizona State 3-0 start, does that mean that they are for real? We're also digging into Deion Sanders and his comments about the media. Is it helping more than it's hurting? And also the ACC realignment talk, Florida State and Clemson, with the ACC somewhat looking that there might be caving. Does that mean that Florida State and Clemson are not potentially coming to the Big 12 conference? We'll discuss that and more, along with giving you some picks on who we believe is on upset alert this week in the Big 12 conference, and also who is the lock of the week and the big game, Oklahoma State against Utah. We have all those picks and more. Hey, just as a reminder, people, look, technology is what it is. So I apologize. The recording of this video didn't start off great. It just kept spinning and spinning, and you missed the first 3.5 minutes of the show talking about Arizona State. I apologize. We'll pick it up right where it left off. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Yeah, I mean, it was one that they should get respect for winning that.
Yeah, I would just add to, in relation to Arizona State's overall program, I think if you're looking at like the ceilings of the 16 schools in the Big 12 and what the program's going to accomplish, I think Arizona State's in the top group of that, along with teams like UCF, potentially one of the schools in Texas, the Metroplex, like TCU, maybe Baylor. It's close to the Dallas area. Oklahoma State's, I think, been at their ceiling for the last 25 years. Cody, you would know a lot more about that than I would, having covered them for a long time. I think Kyle Whittingham's done a great job at Utah, of course, but what Arizona State has that not every school in the Big 12 has is access to great talent. There's a lot of really good skill talent in the state of Arizona and the Phoenix, Valley of the Sun area. You know, Southern California is not too far away. Las Vegas has a lot of really good skill talent. If they can tap into that and recruit that talent, I think that could bode really well for them. And then, you know, you can go to Utah and you can try and target, that poly community for offensive and defensive linemen. I've always said that if I was the Arizona State head coach, I would offer 20 to 25 offensive and defensive linemen from the Midwest, bring them to campus in the middle of October for an official visit. And the first 5 to 7 that say yes, it's your spot and you're committed. I think that program just has a really high ceiling. If, like Cody said, the alignment is there. And I think Kenny Dillingham has just united that program and that overall athletic department since being hired, because like you said, Cody, it was a mess. And I still think that he's still cleaning up some of those things, but he's someone, to me, who is really hard to not believe in when you listen to him talk. And I know the first year they just won three games and they weren't super competitive at times, but they had really good moments. And then this year they've started really great too. And I've compared his second season to Lance Leipold's second season at KU, where they started 5-0, and it kind of came out of nowhere. Covering Iowa State, someone compared it to Matt Campbell's second season at Iowa State back in 2017 after they went 3-9 in his first season. I think those are apt comparisons, and look what people kind of think and believe about the overall trajectory of the Iowa State and the KU programs as steady competitive teams that are expected to go to bowl games every year. I think that should be the eventual expectation for Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, especially if he's able to tap into a lot of the access to talent that they have.
Yeah. I kind of compare it to the Houston situation. Kind of a mess, but the recruiting grounds. Look, Arizona State's got a huge alumni, and I feel like if they can just get it turned around and start winning, all of that support that maybe isn't there right now, I mean, it's growing as we speak, it will just come pouring in. Same way with Houston. Houston, look, I mean, they have a ton of alumni. And it's the rich recruiting grounds that they have. If they can just get it turned around, it's just kind of simmering there. And I just feel like Arizona State is just on the cusp. And I believe this 3-0 start is just what they needed to start getting more fan support. It's not that the fans just don't like football or didn't want to support them or anything, but it's like both of you mentioned, it's just been a mess, man. And when you're dealing with that, who wants to go root for that? Nobody wants to go root for it, much less support it. with resources or anything like that, but it's a place where you can win. It really is. It's like you mentioned, Alec. You get some of these guys, these Midwestern kids down there in October to go visit. I mean, why the hell wouldn't you want to go to Arizona State? It's not a bad place to be. So I like the 3-0 start for them. I think it was really important for them to do it because I don't think a lot of people thought that they were going to. But the real test now is coming up within conference play. Can they sustain it? Do they have the depth, to be able to sustain it? And I think that's one thing, Cody, that we have to try to look at. Look, nobody wants anybody ever to get hurt, but we know it's football. It happens. So do they have the depth right now to get to that 7-win mark or that 8-win mark?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, look at what happened to Colorado last year. I mean, they started out hot and they didn't have any depth, and it started to show down the season. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Colorado and Arizona State are the same level of programs or anything like that, but and that their situations are the same. But I think from the depth standpoint, yeah, I think they probably are. And like we mentioned, that schedule is going to get a lot tougher, and it's going to get a lot more challenging to sustain the success.
Yeah. Speaking of Deion, or Colorado, I should say, Deion Sanders back in the news, blaming the media, saying that they're jealous of college football players because of the amount of money that they make. Look, first of all, let me just say this. I don't think he's wrong 100%. But there's jealousy from everybody in every profession, no matter what. So we're not just talking about this. Everybody, there's jealousy that is out there. But for him to make a broad statement, look, Deion is supposed to be the guy that just tells the truth. Isn't that what he always constantly says? Well, why not just point these people out? That's my whole thing. If you're going to paint a broad brush like that, number one, it's not necessary. I don't even know how that is going to help your program, but whatever. But if you're going to do that, then don't label everybody. Just tell us who it is. Tell us who you believe are the journalists out there that are jealous. Alec, is this helping Colorado at all?
I mean, I'd love to have Shitter Sanders' garage. I mean, have you guys seen it? It's sick. He's got a Rolls Royce or a Maybach. I think he's got a Cybertruck. I'm not a Cybertruck guy. I think they're kind of ugly, but I mean, he's got a sick garage. Like, I think we'd all like his garage. Maybe I'm guilty of what Deion is saying. No, I just think it's prime being prime to me. It is what it is there. They say things that upset people. He kind of has since he was hired to be their head coach there. Prior to the 2022 season. It started on his first day, right? When you think about bringing my luggage and it's Louis comment that kind of everyone got upset about in the first place. I will say in relation to the point of it, like I do think that there are journalists out there who probably have unfairly criticized and said things about Colorado. And I think that, a lot of conversation was made when Colorado restricted the access of the Denver Post writer to ask questions earlier this fall. I haven't followed that super closely, but just from what I understand, it sounds like that writer was kind of crossing a line with like challenging Deion's character and saying that, just disrespectful things to the character that didn't maybe need to be said. And they weren't necessarily about Colorado football. They were more about Deion and in the person that he is and the type of character that he has and in those things. I'll also say this about Colorado, and I don't want to come off as like a big Colorado defender, but the video that surfaced last week after they beat Colorado State, Cody, where the Colorado State quarterback was trying to shake Shitter's hand after the game, and Shitter kind of said no and kind of brushed it off, and there may have been some disrespectful language used in there. Quite frankly, I had no issue with it. That Colorado State quarterback throughout the week or in the preseason said things about, how far our Instagram followers going to really take you, and there was other Colorado State players that said they should have beat the crap out of Colorado a year ago when the game was in Boulder. To me, if you're going to talk crap before a game, if you're going to talk trash, you kind of have to sit there and you have to take it after the game, especially if you lose in the fashion that Colorado beat them. And I had no issue with what Shitter did after the game. There's other things that, Shitter has said publicly, whether it was the challenging of his offensive lineman, which to be honest with you was the truth after they lost to Nebraska. Like if you're going to speak everyone knows that what he said after they lost to Nebraska was the God honest truth. There just isn't necessarily a reason to say it publicly, in my opinion. Right. But to me, back to the end of the Colorado State game, like I didn't have an issue with what Shitter did in that situation. If you're going to talk trash and you can't back it up, you better be ready to eat the trash that other people are going to talk to you.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Deion's latest comments is like if you go back and watch the full press conference and like the context of the question, the reporter was just asking about his relationship with Travis Hunter, and I guess Travis Hunter had mentioned something about the fishing trips they go on and the life lessons that Deion shares there, and the reporter just wanted to get some more details on that. And Deion said it was they talk about everything, but then kind of said that those conversations are personal, and then just went into the whole rant about media attacking players and how they should be, or they used to be off limits because they were amateurs, and now that they're getting paid, NIL money, that people think that it's kind of you can go at them now. So it was kind of a weird, kind of out of context rant that he had, but yeah, I mean, I think the point that he made is true that now that these athletes are making money, I think people see them more as professionals and less as amateurs.
Right.
And it also kind of it reminded me a lot of Gundy's rant from back in what was that, '07, talking about, I'm a man, I'm 40, coming after his players and whatnot. I mean, Deion wasn't yelling by any means, or I mean, it wasn't, he wasn't mad or anything, but it just kind of had some similar context of, going after amateur athletes and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a little weird, a little out of context, and felt like a little forced for what the question was. But I mean, I think he's got a point too.
Right. My take on it is, first off, it was way out of context. I don't know why he went down that rabbit hole, but what he is saying is true. There is some jealousy. I like what you pointed out, Alec, as far as after the Colorado State game is, if you attack me about how I'm playing or say anything on the field about how I'm playing, that is all fair game and should be. I think it should be done because I think it's great. I think it builds a hatred in game, all that kind of stuff. I think all of that trash talking, the more the better, in my opinion. But when you start making it personal, look, even if you made it personal on the field, that's something different. But when you go to the media and you make it personal, that's something different, because that doesn't have anything to do with me playing in the game. That doesn't, because in game, you're trying to get a psychological advantage. So you'll say anything about anybody. I mean, you'll talk about somebody's mom, their girlfriend, their brother, whatever. You're going to do that. That happens. But when you start attacking me outside the frame of the football game personally, that's different. And then you can't expect me to just forget that and shake your hand. However, I would say this. If I was Shedeur, I still would have shook his hand and still told him exactly what I thought about him and what he did. To me, I think that would have been even better of a cut to know, number one, I'm better than you on the field. Number two, I heard what you said and I don't appreciate it. Deal with it. But it is what it is. But back to Deion, I'm just not sure it's helping. I get what he's doing. He's trying to take the attention off of his team, in my opinion, to take the attention off of his team and put it on him. But a lot of people, and I've had conversations with, maybe it's just a way of a smokescreen to, man, we got a tough game. We're playing Baylor. I don't know. But if we're talking about this, nobody's talking about how maybe this tough game is going to come up and how we might not fare too well in this game. I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong, but I don't know that I am, Cody. I don't know that that's not what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've been kind of critical of Colorado and Deion the last 2 weeks, but I mean, he's so good for the Big 12 and for college football.
Yeah.
I mean, every time he does something like this, it's generating clicks for businesses like us. It's generating discussion. It's every game that Colorado plays is huge for the Big 12 as far as viewership numbers. So, I mean, we can be critical all we want and have opinions, but you can't argue the fact that what he does for Colorado and the Big 12 is you can't put into words, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah, I would just echo that with Cody. And I know I've said this on other platforms, but people I haven't heard it. I think Colorado is the most important team to the Big 12 this year. Like, them winning 8-9 games and being in the conference title race at the end of the season would be awesome for the league. Like, I think if you truth serum Brett Yormark and asked him what team he wanted to win the conference, like, I think he would probably say Colorado. Of course, he's non-biased and everything else, but like, if you truth serum him, he would probably tell you that Colorado is the team that he'd like to see win the league the most. I would also just add this about Colorado, and maybe this isn't something you guys will agree with. I feel like they have mostly not been the ones to start trash talk publicly before games. Like we've seen, like Shiloh Sanders has had comments on the field before games. Everyone remembers like the Oregon game last year. I know he had comments in the coin toss area before the Nebraska game. But like to me, that's kind of normal. Like that BU play, I would imagine in pregame stretching, pregame warmups, like there's chatter back and forth between the teams. Yep. I would imagine that's pretty normal. But like you're not seeing Shador or Travis in the week before a game saying things that like the Colorado State players said, or things like Jay Norvell said before last year's game, or like even Pat Narduzzi has made comments publicly about what Colorado has done. Like to me, in a certain sense, they kind of mind their own business until people bring them into it. And because they are so polarizing, like Cody said, and people are attracted to them like a magnet, people are often talking about Colorado. But I think for the most part, they kind of stay in their own lane until people bring them into their lane.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're not doing the bulletin board type of stuff. They do it kind of on the field. So I agree with you, Alec, in that aspect. And again, you're right. I played, and that happened literally every single football game before the game. But even before stretching, when you're just out there walking around, walking the field, kind of warming up, you don't even have your full pads on. You don't think people are chirping back and forth? Of course they are, so that's just part of it. That's just the game, man. It's just the game. Like I mentioned before, I think when people start going personal with it, outside of the media and attacking people personally outside of the field, that's something different. And I don't begrudge anybody. It's not just Colorado. It could be anybody. I don't think that's why I didn't think the whole Mike Gundy thing back in the day. I thought he was right. Look, you want to talk about this kid's play not being any good? That's fine. But if I can remember correctly, the article was talking about how his mother was feeding him chicken after the game. I'm like, what does that have anything to do with this kid playing football, man? That I thought was a low blow. Having said all of that, I think Colorado's great for the league. You both are right. It is absolutely great for the league. Anybody that denies that is crazy. You can dislike every single thing that they do, all of it. You can dislike all of it. That doesn't mean it's not good for the Big 12, because it absolutely is. Moving on here, ACC talk. Look, I hate talking realignment during the middle of football season, but it came up, and so I felt like we at least had to talk about it a little bit. The ACC is basically doing what it should have done from the very beginning, is having talks with Clemson and Florida State about giving them more share of the money that's divvied up in the ACC. I don't think there was any reason for them not to do that. I know there was some talk about, well, there was no place for Florida State and Clemson to go, so they had to renegotiate. And to me, that's backward thinking, because if they didn't have anywhere to go, there's no way the ACC would be in talks to try to give them more money, because they wouldn't have to. So it doesn't make sense to me. Having said all of that, Cody, does that kind of put because if they're starting these talks, I believe it's going to eventually lead to both of them getting more of the share of the money. Does that kind of put the end to the talk of Clemson and Florida State coming to the Big 12?
I don't think so. I think it's more of a short-term fix, and maybe just to get a solution to all the legal battles that they're in. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a legal expert. I don't understand half of this stuff. I don't like realignment just as much as anyone else. But yeah, I think it's more of a short-term fix. I think eventually down the line, there's going to be another big wave of realignment. When that'll be, I don't know. I mean, I've always thought that there's going to be these two kind of massive conferences, and you'll have smaller divisions within those. But yeah, I think it's more of a short-term fix. And, I think the other thing that was key to note, and our Brandon Marcello reported this, I believe it was this morning, but they've also, in these discussions, they've also talked about shortening that ACC grant of rights with ESPN from, I think it's supposed to expire now in like 2036, and they wanted to shorten the deadline to 2030. So I mean, to me, that just seems more of a short-term fix that eventually down the line, the ACC is gonna implode and all those schools are gonna go elsewhere.
I was never really under the impression that Florida State and Clemson and any of the other schools that are the biggest brands in the ACC were trying to get out to join the Big 12. I think they were always trying to get to a Big 10 or SEC program conference if that opportunity presented itself. As far as why the ACC and the other schools would necessarily agree to this with Florida State and Clemson, I don't really understand why. I guess for the short term, it secures your security in terms of the idea of those schools staying and bringing some stability to the conference, but doesn't it just limit your revenue every year? And it doesn't bring you long-term security. And if in 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it may be, that the conference grant of rights agreement that it's shrunk to becomes available for everybody, that they're going to try and go elsewhere if they can. Like, yeah. I don't understand if you're one of the smaller brands in that conference, if you're a Boston College, for example, like, why would you agree to this? How does this help you in the short or the long term? I would also just say that, like, I don't view it before this was reported, and I don't know if this fully is going to end up happening. And I'm, like Cody said, I'm not a legal expert, but I was always under the impression that they were just going to end up settling with the two schools, and whatever other schools wanted to continue to follow that path, we're going to end up settling with the conference as well. Because if you're Florida State, Clemson, and any other school that wants to sue your way out of the ACC, what do you have to lose by going to court and going to trial? You have nothing to lose. What you lose is, yeah, you're stuck here until 2036. You signed your rights away. If you're the ACC, you have everything to lose. If your grant of rights are ripped apart, all of your member schools can leave and go elsewhere for free. So Florida State, Clemson, and any other school that wanted to follow that path, they can come to a multi-$100 million settlement with the ACC, pay them the, let's say, $350 million to get out 10, 15 years early. And then all that money goes to the ACC. And what can the ACC do with all that money? They can use it to distribute to the members that still want to be there, or to target new schools like the Pac-12 just did, adding all the Mountain West schools. I just never really understood why the ACC, like, I never thought that a settlement, or I never thought that anything other than a settlement would come out of those schools suing them in a certain sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not a legal expert like you guys. It seemed like Florida State just wanted to fight to get out. And it seemed like Clemson, on the other hand, was like, well, just show us what you're doing with the money. One of those type of things. And we're not necessarily saying we want out. We do want out, but we just want to know where the money is. And that's where their fight is. Florida State's been at this before, and they just want out. Is there a place for them to go? I don't know. I'm kind of like you, Alec. I wasn't under the impression that either one of them wanted to come to the Big 12. I thought it'd be nice. We cover Big 12. I thought it'd be great if they did. But at the same time, I don't want to say that it would be a lateral move per se, but I guess maybe it is. I view the Big 12 as being a better conference than the ACC. I know a lot of people don't. I believe that it is, but maybe I'm just biased. I get that. On the other hand, it's like, what's the point? Just if it's all about money, and we know that it is all about money, I'm with you, Alec. Okay, so why do I agree with this if I'm Louisville or NC State or Virginia Tech? Why exactly do I agree with this? Because if the ACC is just going to implode, well, let it implode. I'll go somewhere else. I mean, the Big 12 will take us. The Big 12 would take me. Why don't I just go there and get more money? Doesn't make, I mean, if it's truly about money, I don't know, Cody. It just seems like a weird situation that, number one, if the ACC, they could have done this a long time ago. I think this is all that Florida State, hey, pay us more. We want more. Clemson wanted that. Why didn't they just do this from the very beginning?
Yeah, I don't know. And it honestly just seems like Florida State just wanted to create some chaos to kind of get their way, I guess, a little bit in this. But like our Brien Marcel said that in his report this morning, that, I mean, it's unclear if there's even support to get this new deal done. I mean,
right,
like we've been talking about, why would these other schools agree to this? There's not real proof that they are, or that they're going to. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's something that really doesn't make sense, and this whole process really doesn't make sense, and it's confusing, and all the legal terms don't make sense to me. But yeah, I think just from a conference realignment standpoint, I think if anything, this is just a short-term fix for what's going to come down the road eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this. I also feel like Clemson and Florida State aren't the most valuable property in the ACC. To me, it's North Carolina.
100%.
And Miami.
Yeah, Miami to maybe even a lesser extent. And I'm not a TV expert. I'm not a TV exec. I don't really know. But North Carolina is the one that people know a hell of a lot about this stuff than I do, are the one that people say the Big Ten and the SEC covet a lot, especially the SEC, just because the SEC already has, Florida and South Carolina in its footprint, where if the SEC expands, they seem to want to expand to increase their overall footprint. Of course, Texas they already had because Texas A&M was there, but Texas is arguably the biggest brand in the sport. And also, I think a lot of people would argue that now Texas is like full-on SEC country because they have the two biggest programs in the state within the SEC footprint. That being said, like, what would help Florida State more than anything right now is figuring out how to win a freaking football game because they look awful. They're 0-3. They have no chance of getting to the playoff at this point.
Yeah.
Unless everything just comes to their favor and they win out and they win the ACC, and they're a mess. And they signed their head coach to a long-term deal in January. They've lost 4 games in a row, including just an absolute ass kicking. Don't know if I can say that word on this platform or not. Sorry
You
if
can.
I can. Yeah, including absolute ass kicking to Georgia in the Orange Bowl. I get it; most of their players were gone. That would help Florida State more than anything. You want to help your brand. You want to be more appealing to the Big Ten, to the SEC. Start winning games more consistently. You've had one good year in the last 8-9 years. And granted, it was a great year. You went 13-0, and you got robbed of a CFP bid. But start winning games more consistently.
Yeah, that's my thing. You can't be whining. And look, this is just a carryover from last year. Just continuous whining about what happened to you. I get it. It was an injustice, but it happened. At some point, you got to move on. I think it talks a lot about culture, too, when you just bring in a whole bunch of transfers and one thing goes wrong, these people don't have anything invested. They're just like, hey, man, I can go somewhere else next year. If we're losing, it is what it is. They're not invested in Florida State. That's kind of the downfall of transfers. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. On the other side of this, we'll get into a couple of upset alert picks of the week, and then the big game of the week in the Big 12. So we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders Game Day. Again, this is Brien Hanley, Cody Nagel, and Alec Busse. So let's get into this. Upset of the week, fellas. I'll start with you, Cody. Who is on upset alert? Look, first off, the games, there's not like a huge point spread, and we're not counting Iowa State. I'm sorry, Alec. Again, Arkansas State, we are not going to allow. We're not allowing that. No, we're not allowing that. But other than that game, there's not a huge spread on any games this week. So while technically it's upset alert, games should be close. At least Vegas thinks they are. Who should be on upset alert in the Big 12 this week?
I'm actually going to go with Kansas State going to BYU. I talked about this in my Big 12 power rankings piece for 24/7 Sports this week, but I mean, I think we all know that Provo is not an easy place to play, especially at night. I think BYU's won 4 of their last 5 games against ranked opponents there. I also think this is kind of an interesting spot for K-State on their schedule. You had Arizona last week, and then you've got Oklahoma State coming up next week. So I think it's just kind of a interesting spot that, maybe they get kind of caught looking ahead to next week and thinking about the big win they had last week. But yeah, I picked Kansas State to win this game in the preseason, but it was definitely one that I had circled to keep an eye on. Now, I'm not saying that Kansas State is for sure going to lose. I think Kansas State will win this, but I think BYU is going to make it a lot closer than people think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's probably where I would go too, just because I don't really feel like any of the other games in the conference are really like marquee upsets, especially if you look at like some of the betting lines within those games this week. And I think K-State's game, other than the Iowa State game, is the only one with a spread greater than 5.5 points. I could be wrong on that. So to me, like all those are toss-up games. So yeah, I think K-State going to Provo, like you said, Cody, would probably be the one that you circle. I would just take that a little bit further and talk on the BYU side. They're 3-0. They've covered the spread against all three of their opponents. Granted, none of them are very good. Right now, I think SMU is probably one of the greater underachieving teams in the country throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. That being said, they smashed them. I think that Kalani Sitake is a good coach, an aggressive coach. I like those things in a head coach. And I also think that, there's a fair point to, Avery Johnson. I covered his recruitment briefly. Someone who I believe can throw the ball a little bit because I saw him do it in high school, but someone who hasn't fully translated that consistently to the college level. If they fall behind and they have to rely on him to throw the ball downfield, are they going to be able to do that? At the same time, I do agree with Cody. I think K-State wins, but if this is a game that's going into the fourth quarter and they're down 3 to 7 points, or they're only up, a field goal or a touchdown, something like that, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up winning this game by, something like 7 to 10 points, right around what the betting line kind of suggests. I think this is the one game where you kind of have to circle as the potential upset, like we were asked to do, B.
Right. This game, I guess technically, like I said, it's an upset. But I'm going Kansas over West Virginia. It's only 2.5. But here's my thing. At home, you always got to get at least 3. You got to get 3. You're just being at home, you get 3. Well, this is 2.5 West Virginia's getting. And although I did say in the power rankings that came out yesterday video, I was off both of these teams. I was just jumped off the train. Kansas has more talent. And I just, at some point, I got to believe that talent has got to just rise above maybe what's going on possibly in the locker room or just bad play altogether. So I'm thinking Kansas over West Virginia. Again, it's 2.5 points. So it's not like it's 10 points or something like that. So it's pretty close. But I'm going to take Kansas as my upset of the week. Speaking of that, Alec, who is your lock for the week? Again, spreads aren't crazy this week in the Big 12.
Before we move, can I just ask you guys just like a poll question on KU? And Jalen Daniels obviously struggled through the first 3 weeks of the year with like 6 interceptions. Do you think that that's more on the loss of Andy Kotelnicki to Penn State, Jeff Grimes coming in, maybe not being as effective of a play caller for them? Or do you think it's one of those situations where it's like, hey, like, he's kind of throwing the picks. Like, Jeff Grimes isn't the one under center throwing the picks. Like, where do you kind of place some of the blame on the struggles that KU has had offensively with protecting possession?
Yeah, I think you can blame it both ways. Obviously it's on Daniels to make the throws and make the plays and, not put the ball in danger. But I think it's also just the not being comfortable. And again, I know it's not a completely new offense, but not being comfortable with a new coordinator and maybe a coordinator not completely understanding his, Daniel's strengths or weaknesses. So yeah, I think the blame can go both ways. And, maybe this West Virginia game is sort of a get right game for Jalen Daniels. I don't think West Virginia's secondary is all that great.
No.
So, maybe it's kind of opens up something for him to get some confidence back and get some momentum. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think the blame can go both directions.
Yeah, I think it can go both directions too. But I'm going to blame it more on play calling. Look, you got a struggling quarterback. Why not just run the football, especially when you're being effective running the football? That's what I saw last week against UNLV. And I've said it, Devin Neal had 20 carries, should have had 35. Your quarterback was struggling. Just stop throwing the football. Just run the ball. You're averaging over 5 yards a carry. Just keep giving it to him. I didn't understand the philosophy behind that. Now, here's the thing. I think you guys are right. Cody, especially, you brought up a great point in that it's both, because some of these interceptions are horrible interceptions, like throwing it right to guys. It's not like, well, he threw into coverage, but a guy was there or something like that. These are complete misreads that he's throwing some of these interceptions on, and they're just bad. So maybe they're not on the same page. I don't know. But I know that West Virginia's secondary is not very good. We've seen that, especially last week. Lord have mercy, just put on a clinic on how to lose a football game. And I think you're right. I think this might be a get-right game, which is why I picked them as far as technically upset alert. But anyway, back to the locks for the week. Who do you like, Alec, as far as lock for the week this week?
Yeah, I think I'll go TCU. They're about a 2-point favorite against SMU in the Iron Skillet game. Kind of sad that I think this is the last one of those for a while. It's kind of a fun little rivalry down there in the Dallas area. I actually really like the way that Josh Hoover's played for TCU this season at quarterback. He's been really effective for them. Has already topped 1,000 passing yards. Has 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's a great way to start the season, especially for a team that didn't get 3 huge cupcakes in the non-conference because they had to go on the road and play Stanford. Now, Stanford isn't, Georgia or Ohio State, but they are a legitimate Power 4 opponent, I would say. I like TCU to go on the road and beat SMU. Like we said earlier, they're probably one of the more disappointing teams in the country throughout the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, Cody.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go the same way. We're not being really original with our picks here. But yeah, I'm also going to go with TCU over SMU as my lock of the week. I don't like what SMU is doing. I've been really disappointed with them. I actually thought they'd kind of be towards the top of the ACC this season and being in that conference title picture. But yeah, through these first 3 weeks, they haven't looked good. And I know TCU is coming off that bad loss, or I guess losing their big lead to UCF last week. I think they're going to be motivated this week to go into a rivalry game and take care of business. So yeah, I'm going to go with TCU.
Gotcha. I was literally going to pick the exact same game, but I'm going to change it up. I'm going to go on the outside. I'm going to take Colorado over Baylor. It's 1.5. I'm going to go that route. Look, Baylor won last week. We'll see who's under center this week. I'm not sold on Baylor at all. I'm not sold on Colorado either. Don't get me wrong. But I just think Colorado wins the game. They're going to be at home. I think they're going to have more athletes to be able to win. Here's the thing with Colorado. If they can just get some type of running game, I'm not saying they have to run for 150, 160 yards, but last week we saw a little bit of that, of them attempting to run the football. And when they did, they had some success. Now, I don't think Colorado State's any good. Actually, frankly, I think they're terrible. But you know what? You get a little confidence running the football against who you get confidence against. And it just happened to be Colorado State last week. So if they can continue to do that, they didn't get a ton of sacks last week, but they did pressure the quarterback, which was something they absolutely did not do the first 2 weeks of the season. Again, competition, not great, but you build your confidence how you build your confidence. So I'm going to take Colorado 1.5 as my lock for the week. And then finally, fellas, it's not often that you get, I don't want to say this is the biggest game of the Big 12 season, but I mean, if it isn't, it's probably not third. But Oklahoma State hosting Utah. I know it's not the first weekend because last week UCF and TCU, but I mean, most of the conference kicks off conference play this week. I don't know the last time that such a big game was this early. I like the matchup. I love that it's in Stillwater. Not that I have anything against Utah. I just love college campus settings. In college, literally in College City. I mean, Stillwater, as you know, Cody, is a college town. It's like Manhattan. It is I guess Lubbock to an extent. Lubbock's a little bigger, but it is a college town. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, first thing that stands out to me is Oklahoma State being a home dog with Mike Gundy. As somebody that covered Oklahoma State for a while, that's probably not a good sign for Utah.
Nope.
But it seems like Cam Rising will be able to play. I think we've come to learn with Kyle Whittingham that, usually there's some gamesmanship with how he handles injuries and, how he projects players to whether or not they're going to play during the week. But yeah, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State in this. I think Ollie Gordon gets like a late touchdown or something to seal the deal. As we saw last week, but he still can't get anything going on the ground. I think that ends up putting more, if he can't get anything going on the ground this week against Utah, I should say. I think that puts more pressure on Alan Bowman to make plays with his arm, and I don't think that's something that Oklahoma State necessarily wants. So yeah, I'm still going to go with Oklahoma State to win this because it is in Stillwater. They are home dog. That's never a good sign for the opponents. But yeah, I think the concern for Oklahoma State is you've got to get Ollie Gordon the ball to get more carries, to get some confidence in the ground game and stop not that they've had to fully rely on Alan Bowman through these first 3 games, but I think that's not something you want to do going into the Big 12 schedule.
Yeah, to me, this is about as true of a toss-up as you're going to find throughout the Big 12 season. I think these are the 2 best teams in the Big 12, like Cody kind of hinted at. I think Utah is the better team, though, on paper. However, they are going on the road. I think what makes this game super fascinating to me is that I think that these are probably the 2 best sets of offensive and defensive lines in the conference. And I think that's why these are the 2 best teams in the league, because that complements well with effective skill talent on the outside and in the backfield for each team. I really have no clue who's going to win. Oklahoma State being a 1.5 point dog, to me, hints at Cam Rising's probably going to play. It sounded like he really could have gone last week if he had to against Utah State. Just be different. I guess I'll pick Utah just because I think they are the Big 12 favorite. But to me, like if you're looking for an expert gambling pick on this one, I wouldn't gamble on it. I think we'll tell you to not pick this one.
Yeah. You're right, Cody, as far as Gundy being a home underdog. I mean, that's trouble for Utah. This is different circumstances, I guess you could say, but Oklahoma State doesn't know any different. I know it's a different opponent that you haven't played before, but Oklahoma State, it's still, hey, we're a home underdog. It is what it is. Mike Gundy, very successful in those situations. We've seen it time and time again. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the United States because it's Oklahoma State. It's in Stillwater, so he just doesn't get the credit for being as good for as long as he's been there. I just don't think he gets the credit, and that's why I'm going to go with Oklahoma State in this football game for that fact alone. Look, it's nothing against Utah. I think Utah is great. I think it's going to be a close game. But you mentioned Ollie Gordon and haven't been able to get anything on track, and they haven't. I mean, he hadn't been able to do much, if anything, this year. But I think you talked about gamesmanship too. I think Mike Gundy's been holding back. I think they've been just running vanilla stuff, and teams are just loading the box saying, again, the teams that they have played, Oklahoma State's better than they are. And they've just said, okay, Alan Bowman, go beat us. Well, he has. Well, this will be a little bit different. Not that Utah's not going to focus on the run, but when you're just running vanilla stuff with Ollie Gordon, when you got 8 guys up there, you can stop them. This will be a little different. And I think they're going to pull out some stuff that we just haven't seen. I'm not saying they're changing their entire offense, but teams hold stuff back. I mean, and I think Mike Gundy is great at doing that. We saw it all last year. They changed what they were doing and kind of their philosophy, not the offense, but their philosophy and what they did, and it worked out. I think they're going to do that again, and I think this is going to be a close game, but I think it'll be one that Oklahoma State will be able to pull out in the end. I just give the advantage to them and to Mike Gundy.
No, and we talked about that last week too with Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State in non-conference games, that they're usually a lot closer than they probably should be. I mean, I know they blew out Tulsa last week, and that kind of surprised some people with how bad they beat them. But it's never been really Mike Gundy's formula to go out there and show everything in a non-conference game.
Correct.
They're gonna usually win them, but they're not going to show a whole lot, and they're going to save that for the conference schedule. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Ollie Gordon had fewer yards at this time last year than he does right now. And obviously, they, like you said, they changed their schemes a little bit to get him more success in their blocking schemes. But I mean, yeah, they're probably saving him, knowing that what's coming down the road, and the fact that if you do make the playoff, there's a lot more extra games that can be played this year that you got to keep guys fresh for later on in the year. So they're not going to waste 20, 25 carries on him that are big, long, hard runs at this time of the year.
Yeah, I would also just throw in there that I don't know how much I buy that they've hid things, because they had to make a pretty remarkable comeback against Arkansas in week 2. And I also just feel like once you've played 3 games, like how much can you really not put on display at that point? Especially when you had a legitimate opponent in week 2 that you had to make a huge comeback on to come back and protect your home field. Now, maybe there's a certain extent where it's like, if Oklahoma State loses to Arkansas, like what are they really losing? It doesn't hurt their Big 12 title quest by any stretch of the imagination to lose to an SEC opponent. That being said, I think these are, like I said, I think these are the 2 best teams in the league. What concerns me about why Ollie Gordon hasn't had a great start to the season is and you guys obviously talked about opponents stacking the box and saying, go beat us, Alan Bowman, is that Oklahoma State should have the best offensive line in the country. Excuse me, at least in the Big 12. It's one of the oldest. I think they returned all 5 starters from last year, Cody. I think all of them are juniors or seniors or, 5th or 6th year players up front for them. You'd like to see them kind of take control of the game a little bit better and open up holes for Gordon, if that's something that they're trying to do more effectively this weekend. And I think Alan Bowman, he got a lot of flack last year because I think he threw 15 touchdowns, 14 picks. So it wasn't a great year, but he's off to a pretty good start this season, aside from his little episode of shooting guns after a big play against Arkansas.
Well, the thing about Alan Bowman, too, I think he's kind of taking it personal because that's all he's heard all offseason is, can he beat you? If you take away Ollie Gordon, can he beat you? Well, one thing that to take into account also is that he wasn't even necessarily the starter at the beginning of the year last year. They had a rotation of guys that they were trying to put out there, and then he eventually won the job, but now he had an entire offseason to get better as I'm the guy. And that means something. It just does. I mean, when you go from one year to the next, you get better, especially season 2 as a starter. Alec, I also think you're right. Their offensive line, they should be better. They've got a big experienced guys that are back there that all blocked for the Doak Walker Award winner. But I do believe, I know you disagreed, but I do believe that that the reason they came back against Arkansas, they weren't running to come back. First of all, they got behind by so much.
Yeah, they had to throw it.
They weren't running the football to come back. They had to throw it to come back and win that football game. But I just think there's just some stuff. Like I said, they're not going to rearrange their entire offense or hold back their whole offense, but you probably have 7 to 10 runs based on formations and personnel groups that they haven't shown anybody yet. We'll see it on Saturday. So that's what I mean by holding stuff back. Look, you got to go out there and win football games. You got to do what you got to do. But there's certain things that you just don't do that you don't need to do. And they haven't necessarily needed to do that. So I appreciate all you guys, man, for joining us, man. I like I mentioned before off air, I hope you guys are able to come back each and every week. I had fun today. I think this is much better setup for what we're trying to do. Just the 3 of us just talking, bringing up topics and talking about these games, man. So I appreciate you guys and appreciate everybody else out there that's listening. Remember to follow, like, comment, all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell so you know when stuff's coming out from Big 12 Insiders. We'll see you next time.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.